Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Ares, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Nemedia, Ophir, Britannia, Hyperborea, Zamora with its dark-haired women and towers of spider-haunted mystery, Zingara with its chivalry, Koth that bordered on the pastoral lands of Shem, Stygia with its shadow-guarded tombs, Hyrcania, whose riders wore steel and silk and gold. But the proudest kingdom of the world was the arcane library, reigning supreme in the dreaming west. Hither came Kelsey, the librarian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jewelled thrones of the earth under her sandaled feet. Hyrcania is not on that board game map. By Crom, men shall die for this. It is the 50th anniversary year of the original Dungeons & Dragons game. Well, that's not true. The game clearly existed earlier than that during development and testing. It was published in 1974 and made available as a product in the wild. There'll be many 50th anniversaries. We've yet to look forward to the 50th anniversary publication of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and so on. Traditionally, various D&D publishers blundered through the hobby, generating Death Star energy levels of hate from pissed-off players. For Hasbro, 2023 should have seen the perfectly smooth run-up to the anniversary, combined with the latest published version of D&D announced for 2024. There were leaks in 2022 about the future of the game based around the open game license. What the hell is that? Let's consult the archive. The Role Player's Guide to the Galaxy has this to say on the topic of the open game license. Provided you adhere to the terms of the license, including placing a copy of the license in your product, you too could create published material for Dungeons & Dragons and charge customers for it. Earn yourself goodly monies, and you wouldn't have to pay Hasbro a thing. Ultimately, the shock of this news would hit Hasbro board members with all the force of a slice of lemon, wrapped round a large gold corporate headquarters. That license doesn't permit you to mention D&D in your product. Producing a game book doesn't come with endorsement of your lifestyle by Hasbro. We'll go out on a limb and declare that a good thing. Content creators slapped the 5e runes on their product, or told potential buyers that the supplement was for the world's greatest role-playing game. Is that true? The world's greatest role-playing game? Hell, D&D isn't even the world's greatest fantasy role-playing game, cry the naysayers, and they stir leaves in teacups and mutter about Pathfinder, Traveller, Cthulhu, or Bunnies and Burrows. Opinions. I held a role-playing supplement in hand for a friend at a convention. Another gamer, clocking the book and the game, pulled a drive-by and shouted across the intervening void. Crap game. Great game. And that was the be-all and end-all of our discussion, which is as it should be in a crowded convention hall when your time is severely limited. Is D&D the best role-playing game? But it comes in many flavours, leading to edition wars. Within that mess, there's more to get messy over. Who writes the best D&D adventures for whatever editions are out there? The official company, or the individual dungeon masters who craft and fashion tales of daring do, tailored to their players in private? But wait a bit. I spy third-party publishers out there making use of the open game license. The open game license doesn't do a damn thing unless other material is published in conjunction with it. Enter the bittersweet concept of the systems reference document. In essence, this is a diluted copy of the game rules that fuels the open game license. Everything declared open is open for eternity. The systems reference document document outlines the territory available to creators, with some intellectual properties held back for reasons of trademark or other legal shenanigans. At the turn of the century, the open game license sprang fully formed from the sea. It was better than the one true ring. There was no Mount Doom to throw the OGL back into. But a lot of stuff in Tolkien's Middle-earth is easily forgotten and lost. Though the open game license was a fixture for the 3rd edition of the game, this meant little when the 4th edition came along. That new edition's systems reference document was not opened up using the open game license. Instead, there was a misguided attempt to close things down. Forget 3rd edition. It was messy and complicated once we decided to stop selling it to you. Close things down? To fence them off, better to say. The restrictive game system license for 4th edition D&D wanted to be the only game in town. Would that work? The 3rd edition king is dead. Long live the 4th edition king. Well, the 4th edition's reign was cut short. To create 4th edition stuff, you had to glue yourself to the game system license and hand over a fee. Also, you paid in blood by renouncing the earlier OGL and abandoning your 3rd edition content plans. The OGL couldn't be destroyed, though it was potentially possible to sidestep. On what basis? Players want to experience current adventures made for the newest edition. Rules change, but dungeons are still patrolled and dragons swoop down from their mountain lairs. You can't kill the OGL, but you might be able to starve it out. Forget 2nd edition. It was messy and complicated once we decided to stop selling it to you. Oh, and 3rd edition. Now, this is not an old song, but a new verse of an old song based on the old verse but updated to cater to new rulebooks on sale. So let me get this straight. 3rd edition D&D is done. I can still write my own 3rd edition material and make money from that. No cash goes to Hasbro. Or I can switch to 4th, never write for 3rd again, and pay Hasbro for the privilege. On top of that, the systems reference document for 4th edition is incredibly prohibitive, granting access to the stables and not the whole mansion. Oh, and the right to publish my own products can be revoked at any time, taking my work off the market. But if that shit goes down, I still wouldn't be allowed to produce new material for the 3rd edition that I'd already renounced in blood. I've oversimplified the history as I'm leaving a drive-thru RPG and Dungeon Masters Guild to stick to the meat of the story. Upshot. Well done, Hasbro. What did you think would happen? On paper, the concept was to hustle everyone on board with the new edition of the game. Out in the wilds of publishing, Paizo took the 3rd edition of D&D with its free systems reference document and, under the open game license, created a rival game, Pathfinder. The 3rd edition gamers who still wanted that 3rd edition feel suddenly found there was a new sheriff in town, and he was buying everyone drinks in the saloon, which looked awfully like a fantasy tavern in D&D, a 3rd edition one. It didn't help that 4th edition wouldn't provide anything like a 3rd edition experience. When advanced D&D went to 2nd edition, you could easily still run adventures using either rule set. These considerations are consumer considerations. Hasbro didn't care for the idea of letting people make money off their thing, even though it wasn't their thing to start with. It was their thing now, almost. Why let the game stay in the hands of the players? That's absurd. The open game license gave the community even more of a community. Hasbro tried to sideline that by creating a game system license. 3rd edition will wither on the vine when 4th edition strides victoriously into the village square. No, didn't pan out that way. What was declared open was open for eternity. Let's jump up an edition from 4th to 5th. The open game license was once again in play. 5th edition came with a friendly systems reference document. Third-party 5e products were all over the shop, courtesy the OGL. Why allow this? There are many reasons. Here's a major one. In the early days of D&D magazines, there was a view that D&D was too important to be left to Gary Gygax. That came from Alarms and Excursions, issue 1. By issue 2, Gygax responded and was in agreement. He felt that it is far too good to leave to you or any other individual or little group either. It now belongs to the thousands of players enjoying it worldwide. That sentiment has echoed and amplified down the decades. Echoes and Amplifications was an early fantasy role-playing D&D rip-off set in a series of vast noisy caverns, and that is a role-playing fact. Nowadays, Gygax would add the game is far too good to leave in the hands of a large group, evil company, or world-spanning colossus of a megacorporation. The game belongs to the millions of players enjoying it worldwide. Role-playing game publishers were, for a long time, book publishers. You kept the game alive by publishing more books. This led to a bloated rule set, Oh damn, what's the new rule for shrugging out of armor underwater while visiting the Dragon Planet, where the laws of physics are a bit different? Not in the Dragon Planet sourcebook, much to our surprise. The rule isn't in Zodabread's complete guide to nearly every piece of equipment. It must be in Wizardy Doings of the Interplanetary Death Cult, Volume 2, Appendix F. Bloated rules. Solution: release a new edition and start lean again. Core rulebooks sell well to gamers. Declare that the new rules are backwards compatible, whether this is true or not, and carry on as normal. And allow the unofficial creators to come up with all the bloated third-party stuff under an open game license. Stay lean, sell rulebooks, let the third-party people drive the sales of your own rulebooks. But staying lean is never enough for fat cat boardroom directors. Inevitably, game publishers push out their own official material, and the whole bloating cycle starts all over again. Every edition of D&D is compatible with every edition of Microsoft Windows, and that is a second role-playing fact. The clever thing, arranged more by accident than design, is reliance on 3 rulebooks, truly the 3 pillars of role-playing. You can take monsters from one monster manual and drop them in another edition of the game, more or less. The amount of effort it takes is up to you. Play Advanced D&D 2nd edition using a 1st edition Advanced Adventure? No problem. File off a rough edge or 2 and you're done. Run original D&D as 5th edition? Oh, you're a cave dweller transported to the flight deck of a tumbling spaceship. Good luck with that. Running 5th edition using the original rules would be like driving a double-decker bus into a low bridge. The entire top deck is shorn off. Editions, rulebooks, products, money. Squeeze more money out of the setup. How? When the game is arranged for others to make money from, we should find a way to start charging rent. And so, to the boardroom chat on making more money from the business. The open game license was too open. Don't close it off, just restrict the flow of cash to the community creators. Give the third-party people the right to earn cash, which they already have, in exchange for a mild case of taxation. I once gave legal advice on using the open game license. My recommendation went back to a few months before the leaks happened and had nothing to do with the cataclysmic event. My point: I knew what the fuck the OGL was before it exploded. But let's talk about the Great Sundering, the Apocalypse, the Hasbro incident. Once again, it was time for a new edition of the game. Eternal Dungeons and Dragons, or whatever they'd settle on. 5th edition was shopped around in the early stages as D&D Next. Playtesting done, it was time to publish Dungeons and Dragons. Why is it referred to as 5e by the community? Well, that's a state of affairs for third-party content creators. They can slap 5e on their own products that cannot reference the name of the game. Meanwhile, in official D&D, it is officially D&D. Bloat had set in. Lots of books out there. Time to go lean again. All the old 5th edition books can fade into the background as physical publications, but they'll eventually migrate in a herd over to the digital supply shop known as Drive-Thru-RPG. Hey, you'll be able to order your own print-on-demand copies for a lot of that stuff. Everyone's a winner, and we'll return to that phrase. Time for a 6th edition of the game that we're not calling 6th edition. We want to keep the core audience and make money from the successful third-party people. It'll be Eternal D&D or something. Once we're settled on it, we'll call the damn thing Dungeons and Dragons. Leaks. Hear ye, they're going to fuck with the license, oh no. Of course, for a new version of the game, there'd need to be an updated systems reference document to go with the open game license, we understand that. No, they're going to fuck with the actual license. If they find a way to do that, screw you, Hasbro. Don't shit down my back and tell me it's chocolate. Straight from the lips of Hasbro. Hey everyone, come and try our new flavour of D&D. It's, drumroll please, chocolate. There'd be a new open game license that would subvert the original, lay siege to it by tunneling under the foundations, something. Come to the dark side, we have the best coffee. Sounds legit. Very basically, Hasbro wanted to start charging rent. If you didn't play ball under the new regime, you were out of the system entirely, and the number of people generating third-party content would shrink dramatically, leaving Hasbro in charge or feeling in charge. I'd said role-playing game publishers were for a long time book publishers. They've been digital publishers for a long time too. If you want to publish your D&D thing, what are your options? Just go digital. Easiest way. Use Drive-Thru-RPG or Dungeon Masters Guild. I've bought digital files from Drive-Thru-RPG and I've used the print-on-demand service as well. Hasbro loves the idea of digital D&D. COVID brought a surge of players into the hobby online, connecting across the globe for games. Hasbro gained from sales of rulebooks. But what if Hasbro could provide a computer game-style interface for online players to tap into, with 50 ways to drop your loot box? Make new plans, Stan. Those who published official D&D always seem to be obsessed with turning the game into something far bigger. Why be the biggest fish in in a small pond when you can leap out into the ocean and what? Promptly be swallowed by the ocean? Lots of missteps there and thoroughly documented. Let's keep this brief. Hasbro's new underbaked license would affect 5th edition creators. Very specific ones at first. The top moneymakers. Who? A few RPG companies, some content creators on YouTube, anyone who suddenly had a Kickstarter explode with unexpected success. This was highway robbery, on a timer no less. So up 5th edition, start charging rental fees on it, strip mine the financial data now provided by the third-party marketplace under the new agreement, then ride herd over the 2024 version of the game under, presumably, even more ludicrous terms. But the open game license was for eternity. Inevitably, there was an embarrassing climb down that served as merely one of many embarrassing climb downs for Hasbro. Don't lose your shit at the gaming table and call yourself a winner. Everyone's a winner, remember? You're going to hear people say that they won and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plans. Those people will only be half right. They won, and so did we. Make a new plan, Stan. That's a pretty pissy statement. Everyone's a winner, baby, that's the truth. Don't shit down my back and tell me it's hot chocolate. We're all winners here. No, that's not it either. Our critics are half right. We win whatever happens. Now you get a D&D, and you get a D&D, and you get a D&D, and you get a D&D, and... But we're ahead of this particular story here. Before things settled, we wondered whether or not the sky was falling in one piece or two large pieces for all the difference that made. I went in search of video responses. Everyone had a legal opinion. The OGL is for all time and then some. One video response was The OGL and Me, The End of an Era by Kelsey Dion. Was it good or bad fortune that she was on the brink of releasing a crowdfunding campaign for her own OGL book? From Kelsey's view, it was not great. To avoid falling foul of Hasbro, she'd need to rewrite text, leading to altered layout, throwing the commissioned art out of place, forcing her to seek new art to fit on adjusted pages. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. We now know, with all the legal backtracking and alterations, that the dust settled on the side of the community, no matter what emerged from the mouth of Sauron at Hasbro HQ. Everyone's a winner, baby. D&D was released to Creative Commons. It sort of felt like the revised open game license was a fellowship, with Boromir eyeing up the gold and declaring the contract couldn't be used for evil purposes with him in charge. As long as he was definitely in charge. Oh, and he was in charge, and he'd be wanting some of that gold, by the way. And Creative Commons? Boromir was dead. Spoiler alert for a story first published in 1954. Admittedly, Sean Bean doesn't die in every movie, but it is a dead giveaway in too many movies to mention. Yes, Boromir was dead, and the Creative Commons Fellowship marched down the road that goes ever on. Creative Commons gave away the shop, and the bins stacked in the alleyway behind that shop. I recalled Kelsey's game and wondered what happened. My first view of Shadowdark was in her OGL video, as a floppy prototype copy. Her crowdfunding was so successful that if Hasbro had its wicked way with third-party money under the new restrictive plan, Kelsey would have paid so much rent to the bastards that she'd have floundered in fulfilling her project. Didn't happen. The restrictive game license died, shot in the head by a silver bullet, smeared in garlic and cyanide with a hint of peanut butter thrown in. This is Shadowdark. The D&D elements are by arrangement through the Creative Commons setup, Hasbro backing down big time. But there's a new license in here, the Shadowdark license. And that allows the community to produce supplements for Shadowdark and to make money without having to pay Kelsey anything. Here's Shadow Sun by Greg Christopher. This revives the D&D property Dark Sun for the Shadowdark universe. I ordered a print-on-demand copy from DriveThruRPG. Greg didn't pay Kelsey or Hasbro for this work. Hasbro is aware of interest in Dark Sun, but isn't interested in resurrecting the setting. It hasn't been available as a live product since the days of 4th edition. 5th edition couldn't handle the setting, apparently. I'm certain that gamers converted Dark Sun to 5th edition anyway. Shadowdark Sun is a step too far into the desert for Hasbro, but let us turn to Shadowdark itself. What is this game, and how did I end up with a copy of it? The initial crowdfunding was over, but the OGL fiasco spurred a lot of people into action. You could still come in as a late arrival to the tavern and pick up a copy of the book. So I did. And it travelled from the Shadowdark on board the ShadowBarge to the Firth of Shade in Scotland, where it rests upon this dark table. What is it? It's Dungeons and Dragons by another name, filmed in black and white. D&D 5th edition provides the basic chassis for this devilish, demonic hot rod. The body, the revved up engine, gothic stylings, the paint job are bolted on from the chassis up. What does it remind me of? Are you expecting me to say this or that particular edition of Dungeons and Dragons? I buy older files for historical purposes. True, video purposes, certainly hell for gaming purposes. Periodically, whenever I found one physical copy of an old game, at the only cheap price on the interwebs, I seized on older role-playing gamebooks and boxed sets, purely for historical purposes, or for trying out on my gamers, the mad fools. A PDF from DriveThruRPG is one thing. Sometimes you understand more about the hobby from seeing the original game in a box. Those rare cheap finds are growing rarer and more expensive, so these days my preference is for digital files or print-on-demand reproductions. In other words, I'm well versed in most editions of D&D, not 4th. If you like 4th edition and have fun with it, enjoy by all means. What are older role-playing games like inside their boxes? Often the rules are divided into booklets. There may be super hard dice in there made by Colonel Lou Zocchi, adverts for other games including yesteryear's prices, flyers for conventions or organisations that no longer exist, cardboard cutout standee figures or counters, all sorts of quirky things. Second hand you'll find forgotten character notes if you're lucky, letting you decode how the games were played. You peer through a fascinating window into the hobby's past. It is from these early rulebooks that you learn there was a referee or a judge or an adjudicator or an umpire. These terms come from wargaming, and some of those undoubtedly stem from peacetime manoeuvres by real armies messing about in muddy fields in rehearsal for the actual thing. I suspect umpire may be stolen from cricket, but that is a game too far in this discussion. Anyway, I learned about the referee from historical artifacts, ancient tomes, and the even more ancient scribes who penned them. Referee, clearly a precursor to the dungeon master. Game equipment recommendations were basic in early gaming rulebooks, practical whenever possible. I'm ignoring H.G. Wells, who in the wargaming world gave us the mood of setting up your battlefield in the garden and stealing your sister's dollhouse for use as the objective and firing improvised catapults and other siege engines at said dollhouse. We're here to discuss role-playing games. With fewer rules to an early role-playing game, you could fit your character's statistics on a card. An index card, say. Basic practical game accessories, index cards. The influence is right there in the rulebook. Shadowdark does not remind me of any particular edition of Dungeons & Dragons, even though it is based on 5th. Instead, it brings to mind the hobby in general. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There are those who only play D&D, and there are gamers who only play a particular edition of D&D, and that is fine. Have fun with whatever it is you're rolling dice for, if dice are involved. We would play games weekly forever. At a gaming club, there's the immediacy of getting into a game, finishing a game, and asking who's going to run what type of game next week. I played several role-playing games before finally stumbling into a game of D&D. 5 or 6 of them going by memory as I tried to pin down the name of some barely played science fiction piece of nonsense. At a club you see a lot of stuff, from the achingly brand new to the Jurassic. Shadowdark pays tribute to the early days of the hobby with all sorts of references, but it also reaches out down through decades of innovation to brew up a fresh lick of role-playing paint. Let's start with the book. Very severe design, stark, well, start as you mean to go on. The title is on the spine, I might as well say abandon all hope ye who enter here. Quite right too. The Arcane Library logo is fixed to the book by means of spells unholy, outre, and long forgotten. Here are 3 5th edition D&D books to give you a size comparison. You can do all of that there with this book here. Next to a compact role-playing game, Paleomythic, how does Shadowdark stack up? Paleomythic is published by Osprey, who branched out from military books to role-playing games. The biggest mark against the Stone Age game is that the rulebook uses a font I can only describe as Times New Electron Microscope. I understand Osprey's move here. Create a tidy series of role-playing systems. They'll fit quite well on your shelves next to any military manuals you picked up. What's the unwritten and unobserved rule that rulebooks fall foul of? Readability. Why is Shadowdark the size it is? Usability. The font size is good, and the book isn't too heavy. Anyway, it's not the weight, it's the bulk. The rules are in one handy volume. I've made house calls as the RPG doctor. Trekking on foot across town to a venue that sags under the sheer weight of Scottish rain, the role-playing bag has to be waterproof and compact, manageable. You leave stuff at the venue, keep the rulebook with you for reference and as a physical reminder to get writing. If you have a large coat with massive pockets, the Shadowdark rulebook will fit. For reasons of science, I tested that in the hall. A Shadowdark fits in my coat pocket, and that really is a role-playing fact. Kelsey made a point of size matching the game screen and the fan magazines so that everything is easier to carry. What of those magazines? They contain material, showcased on the covers, that would have seen Kelsey burned at the stake as a heretic back when anti-D&D lunatics put so much pressure on the hobby that rulebook sales increased. Well, damn. But to return to the practicality of running the game, I could hold the book in one hand for reference and roll dice with the other. With a third hand, you can move figures across a map while using a fourth hand to scribble notes behind the game screen. Dungeon Masters aren't listed as human in the monster manual. There's something about this rulebook that runs like a seam of gold through the geological record of the hobby. The first thing you'll find inside the front and rear covers is reference material. Rulebooks used to have that attitude, dropping you into the game from the start. I could lift a few games off the shelves and stare at early rulebooks that would mystify game designers half a century on from the publication of Dungeons & Dragons. This used to be less than helpful to beginners. Rulebooks weren't written for beginners. You'd be thrown straight into the game by way of character creation. If you were lucky, the rudimentary setting might be explained to you after a long while. Rulebooks wouldn't outline the nature of the game though. Charts, tables, character classes, and now the setting, maybe if you're fortunate and we're in the zone. But wait a bit. What is a role-playing game? Good luck with that one, sunshine. You'll need to wait for the hobby to evolve a bit before you read comprehensive sections on role-playing in a role-playing game. In some cases, you won't even find comprehensible sections. Was original D&D like that? It wasn't for beginners. There weren't any beginners in the beginning. Dungeons & Dragons was created by wargamers for wargamers. You knew your way around combat results tables. Any baptism of fire was already in your past. Beginners came along later. Though Shadowdark throws you a slice of mood as an appetizer with those instant reference materials, this tome is all about playing the game and organising the book to make gameplay easier. If you're wondering what a role-playing game is, worry not, that's explained. There was a time in the hobby when rulebooks skipped that part. I'd like to say those days are done. Not quite true, but I'd like to say so. Should you find yourself digging into the archaeological sites in search of games you can still play today, I advise caution. Decode, decrypt, demystify, demist, and D20 means a 20-sider if you didn't know dice talk before tuning into this video. I mentioned bloat. Rulebook after rulebook, spawning yet more rulebooks. That is the way since time out of mind. This rulebook is compact and runs to over 300 pages, but it does the job of 3 Dungeons & Dragons rulebooks and in larger type. Are you really into endless character classes and subclasses? This game isn't for you unless you join the community and come up with stuff yourself. Shadowdark will run on sand that Dungeons & Dragons would slurp into as the weight of that game bogs down in sight of an endless ocean. This is a zippy little hot rod, a leaner gaming experience, yet not a wafer-thin one. Character creation is fast. Don't concern yourself with all the amazing things that your character gains at higher levels in the style of a D&D character. No, be more concerned with simply surviving that first level. Optionally, you might not even start at first level. There is such a strange thing as a zero-level character. Create a squad of those wandering fools and throw them at the dungeon. Run the gauntlet. The character who survives is your main character and rises to first level. Brutal? Certainly. Does this indicate the game's tone? Absolutely, if you play out that option. Does it sound as funny as I think it is? To me, yes. It's fucking hilarious. As to those basic character classes, fighter, priest, thief, wizard, all are outlined in 2 pages of the rules, though sometimes one of those pages is an illustration. That's how lean the game is. But it is folly to suppose that there aren't any rules holding up the construct. Yes, this is a level-based role-playing game, and characters earn experience to gain levels. The bloated experience tallies of D&D are washed away by an incoming wave of simplicity. Keep the numbers small. If there's a failing in this game, it is the lack of hammers in the equipment section. There are more hammers in the book's dedication than in the main text itself. It remains to be seen if this revolutionary approach to game design will make it into the mainstream hobby. Is there anything revolutionary in the game's design? A lack of hammers. That's about it. We've seen it all before, but rarely have I seen it explained with such brevity and economy of action. If, say, you were a journalist writing to a deadline with a maximum word count ahead of you, you might pick up a flair for being timely and concise. Alternatively, if you were teaching students, beginners, how to handle complex subjects, you might also pick up a flair for being concise, just from a different angle. Call it a live event. Coincidentally, role-playing games are also live events. And gaming sessions spent explaining rules can feel like herding unwilling students into the cattle pen of knowledge. Additionally, if you'd played a metric shit ton of Dungeons & Dragons back in the day, what would your gaming landscape look like as a hobby? On the map of the coastline where the sea has terrible serpents drawn upon it, there's a legend. Here be Kelsey. Yes, Shadowdark is a sawn-off version of D&D, in the sense that Middle-earth role-playing was a cut-down version of Rolemaster, or Daredevils was a truncated rule set torn from the pages of Aftermath, to name but a few historical examples outside Dungeons & Dragons. In a level-based game, is it limiting to see Shadowdark characters enter careers at 10th level? In D&D, once upon a time, you were expected to retire at 10th level and build a castle, become Lord of the Manor or Lady of the Lake. If high-level D&D is your thing, you'll find a way to ad-lib high-level Shadowdark should you really want to. The cut-off point here clearly recognizes that mid-level play is where the fun starts to slowly dwindle in these level-based games. What does the game give you that would be useful for beginners in the hobby? Everything. And the kitchen sink. You'll find a lack of charts with everything. That was the design ethos of a vanished age that sank beneath the waves alongside Atlantis, and beginners need not be bamboozled by near infinite chapters devoted to charts. However, there are many tables. Encounters mostly. These will serve beginners well when nothing but a blank space sits in front of the bewildered adventure writer. They're useful at first until beginners build up that mythical body of experience and rely on tables less and less often. Even veteran gamers don't mind rolling dice and consulting the odd table from time to time. There's use here. If you can't stand random encounter tables, you have a hefty section to skip. Spells, monsters, and treasure come from D&D. There are variations tying into this book and the mindset that you need to crack on with these sections, so keep them brief item by item. As ever, when in doubt, quote Dorothy Parker, brevity is the soul of lingerie. Unusually, and this is down to postal services the world over, I've received a separate Kickstarter adventure book for Shadowdark before the rules arrived. Adventures were on my table first. Quirky. There are already loads of adventures and supplements out there for this game, and there will be more. If you fancy a game of Dungeons & Dragons with less character material to consider, then this might be the game for you. After much searching, during which my torch whispered and guttered, I located the Pits of Brund. My library is a writer's library, in the sense that books are not stored alphabetically, for that way lies madness. Instead, I cram books in where they will fit, based on the doctrine of space available being the available space. Marcus Brody once got lost in his own museum. I've only ever been trapped inside my library once. Back to the game. Everything is optional, and the rules say so. The idea that the dark is a meaningful force in the game, that might put you off. Torches burn down in real time, not game time. Invest in a chess clock or other timer to keep track of dwindling resources. Absolutely optional. Another thing that sticks out in the rules, and this ties rather neatly to real-time light resources, is the idea that initiative, who goes first and in what order, is always switched on. This is whether you're in combat or not. That may work for you. As a beginner, you might not even notice the difference. The things that are constantly on in games are there and have been there in the hobby before. Aces and Eights is a Wild West role-playing game which does away with game concepts like player turns and combat rounds. Once you establish initiative, your gunslingers are performing actions and those actions take time. In a fight sequence, time is always on. You just keep adding new actions that take time until one side runs away or is shot dead. So the idea of a thing always being on in a game situation isn't new. The notion of time ticking down also isn't new. Often, just to light a bonfire under players' arses, you give them 15 minutes to plan the heist and then they have to go. It's true that sometimes spending a whole gaming session eyebrow deep in planning an attack can be the fun part. Next session, the dice decide how that turns out. But yes, when running a game, you must note the mood of your players. If they're going to faff around all night getting nowhere, you step in and set a hard limit. Time is ticking down. You've half an hour to plan your plans and scheme your schemes. The players retort that they only need 5 minutes to plan this. One player wants to go now. Terrorists threaten to kill a hostage if their demands are not met at the top of the hour. Now explain to the commando team of players that they have until the top of the hour, real time, to plan the assault. In Call of Cthulhu, I kept advancing the time whenever players added another layer of planning. This gave the feeling of investigators gathering supplies, consulting arcane books, unfolding maps of the city sewers, and finally discovering that they were stepping out into fog-strewn streets at midnight, even though they gathered at the professor's mansion in late afternoon sunshine. This added to the sense of impending doom. When players gather their characters at a base of operations, move the clock forward while the investigators are static on that map of London. Keep reminding players of this time thing. So, time management of one kind or another is something you'll find in games anyway. It's not a gimmick if it exists in some form in every role-playing game. Don't be fixated over this real-time torch problem. If you don't like it, change it. Is Shadowdark any good? If you make it good. Games come to life in play, not in video ramblings like this one. Where can you buy it? It's available as a PDF, but it looks as though this one is going to run beyond initial crowdfunding and should be in print again soon. Yes, on sale physically. In our ever-growing digital world, it's still possible to play a game out of a book. This isn't a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. But if you have daylight to read by, a book will see you through any computing crisis that would stump your digital files. And if it isn't daylight, if it is dark, I recommend consulting the old Warlock and a video on how far you can see with real torches. There's a link to that video after this one ends.